Hello, and welcome to this NJCU Center for the Arts digital event. We would like to ask everyone to please keep your cameras and microphones off during the program. There will be a Q&A section at the end of the program, and we will only be accepting questions and comments via the chat window. At the bottom of your screen if you are on a computer, or possibly the top right if you are on a different device, you should be able to see an option for chat. If you click that, it will open the chat window where you can type your questions so that they may be read aloud and answered. Thank you, and enjoy the event. Please note, the views and opinions expressed in this virtual event and presentation are solely those of the individual artists in their personal capacity and are not reflective of nor represent official policy, position, or views of New Jersey City University.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Creative Process series. I'm Stephanie Chaikin. I'm the director of the Center for the Arts at NJCU. And we have a great afternoon today. We have a conversation with author Mike Fiorito, moderated by Dr. Edvige Giunta, and with our special guest, Donia Ayoub. Tell you a little bit about our guest this afternoon. Dr. Edvige Giunta is an award-winning educator as well as an acclaimed writer and editor. She has written extensively on Italian-American women's literature, and her articles, memoir, and poetry have appeared in numerous journals and anthologies. Among others, Dr. Giunta's books include Teaching Italian-American Literature, Film, and Popular Culture, and Personal Effects Essays on Memoir, Teaching and Culture in the Work of Louise DeSalvo. She was awarded the Osea Book Club Selection for Italian-American Writers on New Jersey and the Educator of the Year Award for the Higher Education category from the Association of Italian-American Educators, among many others. Mike Fiorito is the author of Call Me Guido, Freud's Haberdashery Habits, and Hallucinating Huxley. His latest book, Falling from Trees, has just been released. Mike is an associate editor for Mad Swirl Magazine and a regular contributor to the Red Hook Star Revue. He has a column called Guido's Corner in Avanti Siamo magazine, and Mike is currently working on a novel. Next, we have Donia Ayoub. And Donia graduated from NJCU in May of 2019, obtaining her BA in English with a concentration in creative writing. She is a writing tutor at the Hub and a member of the English Department's Student Events and Publications Committee. Donia recently completed a 4-week intensive course on publishing at Columbia University, and she is now interning at Pen and Brush as an editorial assistant. So Eddie, please start us off today.
Thank you so much, Stephanie, and thank you, Donia. Thank you, Mike, for being here, and thank you to the NJCU Center for the Arts team, these wonderful co-conspirators. We work hard to bring to you events that sometimes make us forget that we are so far apart. I have been so pleased about the responses to these conversations that we started doing last spring, and they are continuing throughout. They continued in the fall and also now in the winter, spring. Our last one was on writing partnership, and I got so many responses from people who were so inspired that now they are seeking their own new partners or deepening their relationship with their current writing partners. So that's what we hope to do. We hope to open doors of possibilities for things that perhaps you're not doing in your work. And we're very grateful to the writers who so generously donate their time to share their experience with us. I'm especially pleased to have Mike Fiorito with us today. He's a writer whose writing I absolutely love. And last year I had the privilege of being interviewed by him. So it seems only appropriate that now I ask him the questions and then put him on the spot. As Stephanie said, a lot of my work, scholarly work, has been in Italian-American studies. And so Mike and I are fellow Italian-American writers. And while our work is very much steeped in the Italian-American experience, it also is about the human experience. And as writers, we are constantly thinking about the work that all of us who are engaged in any kind of artistic process are constantly thinking about. But ultimately, it's about the process of how we reflect about life, how we remember experiences. So Mike, welcome. And I think the best way to get us started is I'm going to ask you in a minute or so to read something. I just wanted to tell our audience, and again, thank you for being here and sharing this time with us, that in the first part, Mike will read a couple of pieces. I will ask him some questions. And then in the second half, I will turn everything to Donia, our wonderful Donia Ayoub. Please post any questions you have for Mike on the chat, and we will ask as many as possible as those questions in the second half. But you can start writing them even right now. Mike, I think the best way to start us off is hearing you read something, and then I have a long list of questions. I promise not to ask all of them.
Well, first of all, let me say thank you. It's really an honor and a privilege to be here with you, Eddie, and thank you to the team at NJCU. So I'm going to read something from Eddie, as I told you, I have a book coming out at the end of the year. It's called The Hated Ones. And it's a book about stories growing up in the 70s in Queens, New York City. It's a little rough and tumble, some of the stories. The Hated Ones was the name of a local gang. Just to be clear with everyone, I was not in the gang. But there are stories about people with low self-esteem in struggle, and that's to be revealed in the story. So just to set some context, this story is called Roller Royce. Roller Royce was a skating rink, kind of like a discotheque, just to give context. I met Gina Riccoboni at one of Mike Ferrone's house parties. When I say parties, they were more like gatherings where 16-year-olds got wasted and snuck into rooms to make out and grope. When I met Gina, she looked different than most of the other neighborhood girls. She hardly wore any makeup, except for a little lip gloss, and her clothes weren't flashy. She dressed like she'd just come from a tennis lesson. I've seen you at Party Palace, I said, knowing she lived near there, trying to find a way to talk to her. Party Palace was tucked into the back section of PS 210. We called it Party Palace because kids would go there to get stoned, hang out, and drink beer. The red brick walls were marked with sprawling graffiti. Kids peed in the corners, the same place where they crushed their cigarettes and beer cans, and the same place where they made out. I've been there, said Gina curtly. She spoke clearly. She didn't talk like she had rocks in her mouth. In our neighborhood, speaking with a harsh accent stood out. Speaking without a harsh accent stood out. It was like those who articulated their words and who fully opened their mouths when they spoke were being fancy. But I was in love with the way Gina spoke, although I didn't know why. Her whole being emanated illumination. Even Gina's eyes were bright and alive. She was confident, unlike me. I feigned confidence. I was not yet conscious of why I lacked confidence. What were you doing there? I asked with a wink and a smile, trying to break the impenetrable puss on her face. No one went to Party Palace just to hang out. Nothing really, she said. Her face remained stoic. Her emerald green eyes glowed like gems. I knew her cousins that lived near the park. She had just moved from Riverdale to Long Island City. I'd heard that her father had just passed away from heart attacks, or her mother moved back to be closer to her family. Her mother had left Long Island City many years before in the 60s when she had gone to college. But I saw you there with your friends, Ferrone and Squitieri, she added in a mocking tone. She rubbed one index finger over the other. Tisk, tisk, tisk. I froze for a minute, like my secrets had been exposed, seen, like someone knew more about me than I told them. I did a lot of bad shit with those guys. Got into fights, sniffed glue, shit I wasn't proud of. When she realized she had the upper hand, she finally smiled. It was like 1,000 birds just swirled across the sky. She was so pretty. For a moment, I must have looked like a thief caught in the act, but then I relaxed with a smirk on my face. Now that you know my secrets, I said, how would you like to meet Saturday night at Roller Royce? You mean the skating rink? The one near Ditmar's under the L, I said. She took a step back, brought her hand up to her face and chuckled. What? I asked, looking around to see if anyone else saw her laughing. It's just that she paused, bit her upper lip, then looked at me blinking, as if holding back another guffaw. Well, you're asking me on a date, right? I nodded yes. Why, is that so funny? My voice cracked a little. Well, it's just that it's a goofy place. I mean, I would never just go there, she said. Here's your chance then. You could blame it on me and say I dragged you there. I replied, trying to stand up straight and tall. I'll stop there.
Thank you so much. What a perfect excerpt to read, and for one of the questions I have. This is actually a question that came up in one of my creative writing classes the other day. This is a class on flash fiction and flash nonfiction, where we're working, of course, with the very strict word number limitations. Mm-hmm. Where do you find your characters, and how do you decide what characteristics, what elements of the character to bring to the page? For example, like what do you include and what do you leave out? And and also, when you have those reluctant characters, those characters that are in your head, you feel the obligation to bring them to the page, but sometimes they just won't show up. Do you have any strategies, any tricks? I think this is would be very helpful to any writers, and also to my students who are in the early stages of their apprenticeship.
Yeah, well, thank you. That's a great question. I mean, one thing I would say is, writing is easy. You sit down to the typewriter and you bleed, right? And, what I was going for in these stories was really going after moments of, I think they're very powerful, moments of shame, moments of embarrassment. And try not to, to reveal in the character and their emotions, in their behavior, in their gestures. So, how do I make a choice? These were vaguely based on things that actually happened, but I do fictionalize. So there's a kind of emotional content. It has to have meant something. Were you afraid? Were you? Was it a moment of low self-esteem? Joy is hard to write about, I find. It's like everyone's joy is the same, right? Tolstoy said, everyone's joy is the same. It's everyone's tragedy that's unique. So if that answers the question, kind of.
Yes, I think what you said about going for those moments of shame or whatever it is at the center of the story, it really, so knowing what is that you want to bring out about the character. Thank you, very helpful. Can you talk for a second about names? And I think this is for the fiction writers, it's great to know where do you find your names, but for memoir writers as well. Just recently on this face group that I created that's called Writing and Teaching Memoir, a former student, Natasha Persaud, posted something about finally having decided to rename the characters from her life in her memoir. So where do you find the names? Are they actual names? Do you make them up?
So that's a great question. I've had the names of the characters of people that I grew up with were so amazing. I just had to use them. Now, I may not use the exact name of that person, but a name like Mike Ferrone, that's a great name. Squitieri, Schumacher. I think names are important, and names like Tom, not to offend anyone with the name Tom, but to give it, to make it particular. Because I think there's some character in the name. And I'm lucky enough to have grown up with people that had strange names or standout names. But I think it's almost as important. The name helps make it memorable, I think.
Absolutely, and yes. I will never forget Squitieri. So thank you. That's very helpful. So, so do you combine sometimes the one name with another last name, or just
yes,
modify?
Yes, and when The Hated Ones comes out, Call Me Guido. I just talked about my family. I may have changed the names here and there, but thinly veiled. The Hated Ones. I'm probably going to get a lot of flack from that. I'm going to get unfriended from Facebook by a lot of people. But I do change the names around, but I think people will know. And even though it's fictionalized, I'm not a journalist. I mean, I've done journalistic things, but I'm taking from a starting point and extrapolating. But, we all know certain things about situations, and people will recognize themselves. So do the replace all thing. Start with a name and then do replace all.
Thank you. That's very helpful advice. So from the character as conceived as individual character to the collective character, whether it's the neighborhood, the family, the community, and sometimes the place. Of course, can be a character. What are your strategy? What's your process to prepare to work on more on these collective entities as opposed to working on the individual character?
So there's, and that's a tricky, it's a good, like all the things that you do, Eddie, you have these writing exercises, 100-word, and all the various things you do. It's good to set a challenge to explore and experiment. So there's one story in The Hated One. It's called Garbage Park, and the place is a character, and it started from a writing assignment that I did probably 25 years ago. And here's the funny thing: so I grew up in the Ravenswood Projects, right across the street from the Department of Sanitation. Do you know I that never dawned on me? It never occurred to me that there were garbage trucks and the Department of Sanitation depot right across the street, though I could see it from my third floor window and smell it too. But I think it's a challenge, but that's a good challenge. Start with taking a place and making it a character. It's unwieldy, it'll feel uncomfortable. It took me a long time to write that. I probably rewrote it, wrote it again. I fictionalized it. So yes, there are things that I took that are factual, that I did grow up across the street from there, that this was a real place, but then I created, I kind of mythologized aspects of it. So I took liberty in the sense of making it greater than or bigger than perhaps it really was. But if you just say to your students, talk about where you grew up. Give one particular example of where you grew up and why that was different, and see what happens.
That is such a wonderfully simple exercise, but the kind of exercise that can really deliver great results. Thank you. Thank you so much. Well, would you like to read another short piece?
Sure.
It was such a treat to
Sure.
hear you read
Sure. And I'm going to read from Call Me Guido. And
I love the book.
Thank you. Thank you. And I've timed it, so I believe I'm on the 3-minute mark, but just throw a rock at me virtually if I go over.
It's okay.
Let me set a little bit of stage. So Call Me Guido is, Guido is a racial epithet. It should be heard that way. And I'm challenging the reader. I'm going headlong into the stereotypes, but I'm also reclaiming. And if you read the book, you'll see what I mean by that. This one story it's based on my mom, and I should also say that one of the themes in Call Me Guido is my father was a gambler, and so there's a lot of the gambling, the problems from the gambling that I'm addressing. It's very personal. But of course, despite the fact that my father's a gambler, where does my mother like to go? My 80-something-year-old mother who's fallen a few times, Atlantic City, right? So that's where she loves to go, which is horrible for me. So this is it's called Hidden in Lights, and it's based on that. And I'm reading in the middle, so I'll explain where I've got to give some backstory. Driving in on the narrow road that leads to Atlantic City, I can see shiny golden buildings and glittering facades. The skyline looks like a heap of costume jewelry. Checking in at the Tropicana, I get a first glimpse inside of Atlantic City. There's a husband and wife online arguing. "What the hell do you want from me?" the husband shrieks. "I told them I don't got no more money for them to come." "They're my cousins," his wife says. She has a red beehive hairdo. An oversized gold cross hangs from her neck. "You said you was going to invite them." The husband grumbles. As I scan the hotel lobby, it reminds me of the off-track betting places my father took me to as a child. The OTB, they're called. Like at the OTB, the faces of the people at the Tropicana sweat with worry. Their worn clothes, 2 decades out of fashion, look saggy and defeated. I am reminded of all the old worries about my father's gambling, my parents' anxiety about not having enough money to pay the rent, being sent to the auditorium with other school kids who didn't pay the rent, whose parents didn't pay tuition. Knocks on our apartment door from people in long coats, their faces hidden under hats. My mother haranguing my already beaten down father night after night. "Smoking or non-smoking?" the hotel clerk asks. "No smoking, please," I answer. "Son of a bitch," my mother says. "You're such a phony. I can't believe you." "Please, Mom, I can't breathe in a smoking room. No one smoked like you." That was 30 years ago, Mom. She's never forgiven me for quitting. What about Desi? That's my son in the story. She doesn't respond. Cookie, that's her name in the story, my mom, takes the access card and gives it to me, her hands shaky and tense. I fight back guilt, knowing I'll never get a wink of sleep in a smoking room. We head to the room to drop off our luggage. I hold my mother's arm and wearily guide her through the corridors of the hotel. Patty, that's my sister, had told me to drop my mother at the casino, then head to the beach. "You can pick her up later," Patty said. "If you left her at the casino for a week straight, she'd be fine. You come back and she'd be sitting there smoking a cigarette and drinking a scotch." I don't like the idea of dropping her off at the casino. It's like I'm dropping off my child with a psychotic babysitter. Just a little more. Unlike me, B, who's my wife in the story, doesn't nitpick about my mother's edginess, or mine either. She guides us to the casino, knowing I will just get us lost. "Take me to the Wheel of Fortune," my mother says. "That's where the action is." We walk deeper into the casino, passing a lady with gold teeth, carrying a bag that looks like it contains everything she owns. A man sucks on a cigarette, his eyes roomy and swollen. He looks like he hasn't slept, like he drinks until his liver gushes with blood every night. "Not here," my mother says. I don't like anything about this place. I can't breathe. My heart feels knotted. There's a constant din of noise. Amongst the jingles and rings of the casino machines, there are screams coming from people as they win or lose, outcries of woes, loud moans. I'm trapped inside a deranged arcade, blinded by the flashing multicolored lights and assaulted by the deafening ring of the slot machines. Hopefully, a cliff will appear out of nowhere that I can fall off, hurtling to my death. I'll stop there.
Thank you. Talking about place as a character, that casino is definitely a character. Two things struck me in this reading. So I'm going to ask you a two-part question. It will be my last question, at least for now, because I see there are lots of questions on the chat, so we want to move on to those. So as you have said, and as you commented as you were reading this story, these stories are very much rooted in autobiographical experience. So what made you decide to write them as fiction as opposed to memoir? So that's part one of the question. And part two, you said something about tapping into the stereotypes, but also reclaiming, as you do in this very provocative title, Call Me Guido. You know, my first book is called Writing with an Accent. So I think there is a little bit of a connection there. Sometimes you have to claim that which people use to put you down.
Right.
So obviously your work is very much steeped in the Italian-American experience. And as so many Italian-American writers in your work, there is this seesaw of both extricating yourself from and embracing the experience. So I think it's related to the fiction memoir questions, but respond to that question in whatever way you want.
Sure. So I think because it's important that I don't want to be stuck into factual stuff. So while it's starting with, it has an autobiographical jump off point. So it gives you the particulars, the details. And I don't just do that, but for some writings, you know, I've explored that, and but you have to be able to pull it away from that as well. So, for instance, one of the inspirations when I'm reading this, and you know, Eddie, I'm sure you're hearing it, is I'm thinking of Dante. I'm thinking of Dante's Inferno. You know, I looked at Dante's Inferno again after I came back from that trip.
Yes, the moans, yes.
Yeah, and the liver with the liver that gets eaten by the vultures over and over. And so it was there, that wasn't happening, you know, exactly like that. But yeah, I think it's good to try different things. Start from something that actually happened. Try to get as close to what happened as possible. But don't just do that. Try other things too. And then with regard to the stereotyping, you know, some of the great literature that deals with race and ethnicity, that's some of my favorite stuff. Toni Morrison going head on into just horrible social injustice. There's a lot of pain in there. And I think if you go into that pain and you go into that shame, you're probably speaking for other people. You're being honest. And to be honest with you too, it's also, I have found that it was a great way to let it go. You just write through it and then just say, there it is, it's out there. Okay. What do you think?
I like that. Thank you so much. That's a great answer. So I think I'm going to now ask Donia to take over, and then maybe if we have time at the end, maybe you can read another little piece, but I see lots and lots of questions. So Donia.
Hello. So we'll start with Yomalis's question. It directly relates to something you just said about Dante's Inferno. So the question is, what did you draw from your inspiration of Dante's Inferno to your piece?
Well, it's the if you read Paradise, everyone falls asleep, right? The hell is where it's at. You got to go to hell. And so many writers have written, Milton, everyone knows, when he goes to heaven, it falls asleep. But what elements? I think the character elements, some of the imagery, those were I kind of plugged that. I looked at Dante. I would have to say when the experience was happening, I was probably thinking that a little bit, but then I just pressed the gas pedal and really pushed it far. But I do think it's important. I'm telling you guys, because we're all friends here, but people probably won't notice. So it's a little bit of a cheat, it's a little, and that's what writers do, right? You cheat, you steal as much as you can.
Thank you for that response. Our next question is from Peggy Jackson. And the question is, how do you find your beginnings for stories?
Honestly, I think just sitting down and writing them. You're going to have a lot of failed stories. So there's, I have a whole bin of dead letters. But if I think it has to mean something to you. So if it means something to you and you're trying to say something, I think that's an important thing. There should be a backstory to what you're saying, and people may not get the backstory. They may not understand what was your motivation. What is it that you're trying to say? Maybe they do. But sit down and just, what happened? What made you upset? What made you happy? What moved you? And that's a good place to start, I think.
Thank you. Our next question, there are sort of two questions that are similar, so I'm kind of just going to combine them. It pertains to this conversation we were about to have between nonfiction and fiction, and like, what do we do with either or? So basically the question is, how do you decide between writing nonfiction and fictionalizing your real life experiences?
I think everything I write is fiction at the end, because it's all, I feel they're autobiographical starts, but I think other writers here, I'm seeing people's names that Louisa Callio and other folks, Tia Morocco, you all know that too. You start from, you don't have to be stuck there. For me, we're all seeing things from our perspective. And I don't have the ultimate final one singular. Autobiography is fiction, in my opinion. Call it, see what they're asking for when you're submitting and then call it that.
Thank you. We have a question about voice in the writing. So the question is from Gabrielle Mumea. When writing about your life, how do you know when to use your child voice and your adult voice?
It's a good question. So I think, like in the hated ones, there's when the reader knows more than the writer does, when the writer reveals that the reader knows more. That's at least was my intention. And, I just write. I don't always know what I'm doing. And I don't know always how effective it is. But there's that matter of, like when a kid goes, peekaboo, I see you, and we see them. We always see them. But they think we can't see them. And I think that we get a little better at it as we get older. Not that we ever get to the place where we can see things truly as they are, but we see things better. Experience teaches. So I think that showing that lack of experience, that ignorance, naivete, I think.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now we have a question about the publication process. This question is from Deanna. Could you describe the publication process, presumably from a writer's perspective?
Sure. So So I'll just give you sort of some examples of what I've done is I find I'll write on a theme. So let's say it's Italian American, right? You write, there's first of all, let me start with, write about what you love. I think that's very important. Find subject matter you love. And I don't just write about Italian American stuff, there's other stuff I write about, but make sure you love it. Because if you're, I think I've cursed already, right? But if you're bullshitting, it comes across. If you really love, if this is dear to you. So, and then submit the pieces. So write things and submit them. I don't know if any of you have ever seen the movie Barfly, and it's about Charles Bukowski, who, he could be unsavory in a lot of ways, and he could be a jerk, frankly. But there's one thing I remember in the movie. Whatever he's doing, he's getting drunk, he's starting a fight, he's doing stupid things, he's writing. And the other thing he does, he's always mailing in. It shows him opening up the mail. This is when we used to do that, and popping into the mail thing. Write, make it complete. Complete one thing. Mail it out. And if you get rejected, so what? So what? Just keep doing it. Ask people what they think of what you've written. And then someday, I was surprised when I got accepted, to be honest with you. I was like, wow, cool. I'll do this again. I hope that was helpful.
It certainly was. I think that's a great piece of advice that especially a lot of young writers need to hear at the start of their career. So now that we're talking about the things you love to write, so we have one question from Christina, which is, when you have a wealth of ideas and stories to write, how is it that you select which ones to give your time and energy to first?
I'm a maniac, so I write them all. I wrote Falling from Trees, which is about, the evolution of human sentience and climate change and social justice the same time I was writing this. So I wrote on the train. I feel like Dr. Seuss, like I wrote on the train, I wrote in the sky, I wrote at home, I wrote while I was walking, I typed on my iPhone. So I think you really, when the tap is flowing, write, just keep writing, turn the TV off and write. I think also, and by the way, these are just things I do, so I can't say for everyone else. There's a Russian expression, right? I don't know how to say it in Russian, but you have to have a good butt. You have to sit down on your butt and do the writing. And so a lot of us, I've been writing for a long time, but many of us say, well, I'm a writer, but do you write? Did you submit? That's the process. So just write as much as you can. Close the door, turn the TV off. Listen to music. Have children because you're home too. But seriously, like have a stable domestic life. Don't be out there being crazy. Just be home, right? That's how it happens.
Thank you. And since nothing could be produced unless we're writing, but often many writers express their, struggle with writer's block. So we have a question from Kaylee. In your experience, is taking inspiration from different places, like Dante's Inferno, helpful to overcome writer's block?
Yeah, and I think Eddie does amazing things. And I should say, by the way, I've attended Eddie's different workshops and sessions, and Eddie does many different kinds of writing. And you have to explore different things. It's great to do with writer's block. There are six word writing. What is it called? Writing submissions or competitions. They're not competitions, but 6 words. Can you do a 6-word piece? They're possible. do a 50-word piece, do a 100-word piece, write about a place, write about the worst thing that's ever happened to you. Just kind of come up with things to, also reading. I think reading is very important. Read, and if I read something that I'm not, I'm 54 years old, right? So I feel like I've read enough to get into heaven. When I get to the gates of heaven, St. Peter will say, you have read enough. Okay, you can go in. Done some bad things, but you've read enough. I only want to read stuff that is burning in my hands, because from that just really inspires me to write. I hope that answered your question. It's probably rambling. Sorry.
It's a great answer. Thank you for answering her question. Now a bit technical. We have a question from Amanda. How long did it take to complete Call Me Guido?
I don't know, a couple of years for sure. A couple of years, and it had different titles as I was working through it. Titles are important, I think, because I think, and just my opinion, the title should be poetry that rides above it. Like falling from trees. What the hell does that mean? Apples fall from trees. The apple doesn't fall far from the trees. I don't know. But it probably took a few years, and what happened was I was submitting pieces over time. And, you submit a piece, you get accepted. Oh, I should mention this. If you submit a piece, you get accepted, keep sending to that place. And what is the magazine? Do they have a subject matter? Write on that subject matter. After 10 pieces, if they accept them, you're looking at maybe a book. So, it's a slow process. Believe in yourself, get out of your own way, because we beat ourselves up. I suck. Why should I write? I have nothing to say. I mean, I said that all my life, but it's true. And so you say, okay, well, that's fine. I'm just writing. I'm just a guy with my hammer and chisel. Maybe someone likes it, maybe they don't. I hope that helped.
Yeah, it really does. I think we have time for one more question, right, Eddie? Okay, great. So we have a question from Sam. There's so much comedy in your writing. Is it about the specific experience you're writing about, which is the Italian-American experience in this case? Is that what got you to sort of produce this comedic writing, or what first inspired you to pursue comedic writing?
Well, thank you. It's a good question. And it's funny because I started writing comic pieces. And then I met a teacher who I showed him some of my work, and there were like, say, 6 comedic pieces and 1 tragic piece. And he said to me, the comic pieces were okay. He said, but the tragic piece was really, that was your best piece. And I said, really? Wow, I'm trying to be funny. But being truthful is funny. The truth is funny, I think, because when we're trying to be, writing comedy is very hard. It's very hard to be, I make my 10-year-old laugh. I make my 25-year-old laugh, who's, I think, on this thing sometimes. But I think don't go for the joke. Go for the truth. Be close to the bone. And close to the bone is funny. It really is. When you look like a jackass, or when you're describing outrageous behavior, that's just funny. My mom's not trying to be funny in that. She's not at all, but she's super hysterical to me.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your insights with us. I'm sure many of the writers in this event were just thrilled to hear you speak. Thank you.
Can I say one thing? I would like to say one thing about Eddie first, before, I don't know if we're signing off.
We're not signing off yet.
We're not. I just want to say, Eddie, it's funny how I discovered Eddie. So I discovered Eddie through really reading Luis de Salvo. And, you know, the relationship and friendship you had, that writing, it seems so unique that people would work together writing. It's such a solitary thing. And then I finally got to know you, and you know, we're friends, but you're a teacher. And Eddie, for everyone who's out there who is a student of Eddie, you have an amazing teacher, someone who's so engaged, coming up with all kinds of ways, bringing people to talk to you about writing, all these workshops and things that you do, these sessions that you do. I'm lucky and I'm blessed with finding Eddie. And if you find a great community in the midst of your despair and self-doubt, maybe it helps a little. And I think we look to each other, and we need each other to get that support. So I thank you, Eddie, for your friendship and your support. And the school is lucky to have you, but it's beyond the reach of the school. You do so much for so many people. And I'm not just saying that to just make you feel, I want to make you feel good, but I'm not saying that. It is true. It is a fact.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I think community is always the result of a collective effort. And sometimes one of us has to push to get things started, but there is no community happening without really everybody getting involved. And I think, you know, we have a responsibility to ourselves to cultivate community even more in this very, very strange time. And I so appreciate you and your work, but I have to tell you how much I also enjoyed listening to your responses. There is something about that goes on the mind of a writer that is not apparent in the writing. It's everything that goes on behind the stage. And so these are such revealing and instructive answers that you're given to these very thoughtful questions. I think we have a few minutes to do another little reading before coming
Sure.
to the event.
Sure. Well, and everyone, thank you for the questions. They're really great questions, and it just allowed me to blather on for a bit. So I really do appreciate that. Maybe I'll read from Falling from Trees, and you'll see this is very different from what I've read so far. And so these are, you know, I am not an alien from another galaxy or from the future. Well, maybe, but these are just made up stories, pure fiction. This one's called The Purest Rain, and I'll you know, someone just ring a bell or something. Eddie, you know, my father used to say about my Sicilian mother, because he was Neapolitan, Siciliana mangia bedano, sona gamboni. Ding, ding, rings bells. The Purest Rain. I once was, we once were, ordinary people like you. Being together, we have become one mind. I'm sorry if my writing is clumsy. We don't speak, write, or use words any longer. Our thoughts are felt by each other before we have them. The ideas of I and we aren't as clear as maybe they are for you, our ancestors. We are all we. We are all I. I am writing this to you as if we were I, so that my message can be understood. We have been sending our message to you in the form of rain, wind, and dreams. We know you can't hear us, so we write this letter of love to you. We hope you will hear it. When we left the earth, our crew was young. We were sent into the wild hope of finding another hospitable world. The earth's climate spiraled into instability. The polar ice caps melted to unrecoverable levels, making the oceans pour onto the coasts, crushing cities, engulfing countless lives. There were hurricanes, storms. The skies had become hellfire. I volunteered. What was left for me? Our precious world was on the verge of collapse. I never felt that I belonged anyway. I vaguely recall the person who I was, a young scientist, a restless seeker. I was a loner, awkward, incapable of having relationships. I was more content in the computer lab than in the company of people. I had hoped to escape the earth, to go as far away from humanity as possible. I didn't realize I'd be heading smack into the center of humanity itself. We left our friends, our families, and lives on the green-blue planet. We were hurled into space, tossed like a message in a bottle. The moment we launched into space, I felt even my name slipping away. Seeing the Earth transform into a distant dot was like watching my own mind vanish. It saddened me to think that everything I'd ever known, every place I'd ever been, would be gone forever. And though I had a pang in my stomach, I also felt exhilarated. Everything would be out there now, beyond this world. Should I keep going? Another paragraph? Given the immense, let me get to this. After traveling more than 400 light years, the Earth then only a memory, like an ancient myth of our past, we began to shuck off our genetically modified bodies. Our minds, like vines in a peaty moss, wound and tangled into each other. Where one mind ended, another began. Imagine never being alone, never feeling completely empty, all our emotions touched. The speed of thoughts and feelings reached a rapid pace. Conversations between people were heard by everyone. Knowledge that one person may have had held in their head became shared. Our minds, like wind, swarmed into each other. Things like shame disappeared. At some point, even our spaceship slipped off us like a nightgown. We didn't need it anymore. We traveled in unison beyond light speed in something we call forever now. We are everywhere at all times. I'll stop there.
Wow. You couldn't have not chosen a better ending point. I think there is something about these apocalyptic times that really requires that we really ask ourselves questions and reflect just on the predicament of being human. You know, at what point in human history we have found ourselves facing the same challenges, and you know, when we talk to people friends and family in other parts of the world, and we ask each other, so how is it going? And we are all in the same place. And your story so beautifully, in such a touching way, speaks to that. I really wanna thank you for your beautiful, moving, and important work, Mike. Thank you so much for sharing this time with us. And I wanted also to invite our audience to turn on your video so we can see each other. Yeah. To go into gallery view, we can all see each other from all the places. Hey. Hello, everybody.
Allison, so I'm seeing different people.
Yeah, I think that's wonderful. Thank you so much, Mike. Thank you, Donia, and the English Department Student Events and Publications Committee, and that fantastic NJCU Center for the Arts. I would not be able to do any of this without all of you. You have my deepest appreciation. Stephanie, back to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Eddie and Mike and Donia. What a beautiful afternoon, and what a lovely piece to end with. It's just, my mind is open. It's awesome. So I also want to thank Anna Carhart, our theater manager, Justin Tinker, our technical director, and Sabrina Sabalo, our box office manager and Zoom coordinator. We thank you so much for joining us. We have more events that we hope you'll join us for. Tuesday, March 2nd, Marianne Leone, that Donia and Edvige will be moderating. And next up, we have Annie Lanzolito on March 18th. And then we're going to have a concert coming up with the Honey Dewdrops on Saturday, April 17th, and much more. So if you visit our website at njcu.edu/arts and register, all of these events are free. And keep your comments coming. Reach out to us. Anything that you'd like to see us present in the future, we love to hear from you. And yeah, Eddie, turn it to you to close.
Again, thank you, everyone. Thank you, wonderful audience. Your questions, your participation are so important. We need these moments of exchange, and there is something very healing about literature and art. So we need literature and the arts as much as possible to keep our lives healthy and strong, and to keep the faith in a better future. Thank you, everyone. Mike, thank you. Goodbye,
Thank you, Eddie.
everyone.
Thank you, everyone, so much for being here. Thank you.